Listen carefully, because this message did not reach you by accident, and it is not random, and it is not ordinary timing, but a divine interruption placed directly in your path at the exact moment your spirit needed confirmation the most, because God is saying to you right now that something big is about to change in your life. And even though your eyes may still see the same problems, and even though your hands may still feel the same pressure, and even though your heart may still carry the same questions, there is already movement happening behind the scenes that you cannot yet see, but heaven has already approved it. And what you thought was a delay was actually preparation, and what you thought was silence was actually strategy, and what you thought was rejection was actually protection, because God never wastes a season, and He never allows pain without purpose, and He never allows pressure without promotion waiting on the other side of it. And the reason you have been feeling restless lately is because your spirit can sense what your mind cannot yet explain, and there is a shift beginning inside your life that is larger than the obstacles that tried to stop you, and stronger than the voices that tried to discourage you, and deeper than the fear that tried to convince you nothing would ever change, because the truth is God has been rearranging situations you did not even know were connected to your future, and He has been closing doors that looked important but would have delayed your destiny, and He has been removing people who could not walk with you into the next season He prepared for you. And even though that process felt confusing, and even though that process sometimes felt lonely, it was never random, and it was never punishment, but it was positioning, because there comes a moment in every person's life when heaven decides it is time for movement instead of waiting, and breakthrough instead of delay, and clarity instead of confusion, and that moment is closer to you now than it has ever been before. And what is powerful about this moment is that the change God is about to release into your life will not be small, and it will not be temporary, and it will not be something that fades after a few days, but it will be something that shifts your direction, your confidence, your relationships, your opportunities, and even your understanding of what God has been doing all along, because sometimes God allows you to walk through seasons that feel uncertain, so that when certainty finally arrives, you will recognize His hand clearly, and you will understand that He was working the entire time, even when nothing looked like it was moving, and even when no one around you could see what you were believing for, and even when the answers you were praying for seemed delayed longer than you expected. But delays are never denials when God is the one writing your story, and the reason this message is reaching your heart right now is because you are stepping into a turning point that will separate your past struggles from your future testimony, and the strength you built in private is about to become visible in public, and the faith you carried in silence is about to open doors you could not open by yourself, and the patience you practiced when nobody noticed is about to create opportunities nobody can stop. And God is saying that what is coming next in your life will remind you why you had to stay strong during the nights when you almost gave up, and why you had to keep believing during the days when nothing made sense, and why you had to keep walking even when the road ahead looked uncertain, because every step you took in faith moved you closer to the moment you are approaching right now. And even though you may not see the full picture yet, there are pieces already falling into place in ways you cannot control, and in ways you could never have planned, because when God decides to change something in your life, He does not ask permission from your past failures, and He does not consult the opinions of the people who doubted you, and He does not wait for the perfect conditions that the world expects, but instead He moves according to His timing, and His timing is always connected to purpose. And the reason this next change is so important is because it will align you with people who recognize your value instead of questioning it, and it will position you in places where your effort produces results instead of frustration, and it will restore confidence that was shaken during seasons When progress felt slow and invisible, and God is reminding you right now that you were never meant to stay in the place where fear tried to define your limits, and you were never meant to remain inside the boundaries created by disappointment, and you were never meant to settle for a version of your life that is smaller than the promise He placed inside your heart, because something bigger is already being released in your direction. And even though you cannot see the evidence yet, you can feel the expectation building inside your spirit, and that feeling is not imagination, and it is not coincidence. Finished with your purpose, and He is not finished with the promises He placed inside your heart, and the next chapter He is opening for you will remind you that He was guiding you even when you thought you were walking alone, and He was protecting you even when you thought you were being overlooked, and He was preparing you even when you thought you were being delayed. And this is the moment when faith begins to turn into evidence, and patience begins to turn into progress, and expectation begins to turn into reality, because something big is about to change in your life, and this change will not pass you by, and it will not overlook your prayers, and it will not ignore your persistence, but it will meet you exactly where you are and carry you exactly where you are meant to go. And when you look back at this season later, you will realize that this was the moment everything quietly began to shift in your favor, and this was the moment God started revealing why you had to stay strong longer than expected, and this was the moment your story began moving in a direction that no obstacle could stop, and no doubt could cancel, and no delay could prevent, because what God has already decided for your future is stronger than anything that tried to stand in your way, and stronger than anything that tried to convince you nothing would change, and stronger than anything that tried to make you believe your time had passed, because your time is not behind you but right in front of you, and it is closer now than it has ever been before. And the reason your spirit feels this message so strongly right now is because deep inside you already know that something is shifting, and something is opening, and something is aligning in ways that will soon become impossible to ignore. And when that moment arrives, you will finally understand that God was not late, and He was not distant, and He was not silent, but He was working all along, preparing something bigger than you imagined, and closer than you expected, and stronger than anything you feared. Before you move on with your day, I need you to understand something very important, because the reason you are still here listening right now is not random, and it is not coincidence, and it is not just another motivational moment passing through your screen, but it is a divine interruption meant specifically for you, because there is a shift already unfolding quietly around your life, even if your situation still looks the same on the outside. And even if the people around you still treat you based on your old season, and even if your prayers still feel like they are waiting in silence, the truth is that God does His greatest work in places your eyes cannot see first. And what you are stepping into right now is not just a small improvement or a temporary breakthrough, but a transformation that will change how you see yourself, how others recognize you, and how doors begin opening around you, because there comes a moment when heaven decides that your preparation season is complete, and when that moment arrives, nothing that once resisted you will be able to hold you back anymore. And maybe lately you have felt a strange mixture of pressure and hope at the same time. Maybe you cannot explain why your spirit feels restless while your circumstances still look quiet. Maybe you have felt moments where you almost wanted to give up, but something inside you refused to let you walk away, and that something inside you is not weakness, and it is not confusion, but it is the signal that God is repositioning your life for something greater than what you expected. Because when change is close, your spirit begins recognizing movement before your eyes ever see evidence, and what feels uncomfortable right now is often the exact place where your breakthrough is forming. And you need to hear this clearly today, because many people quit in the final moments before their miracle begins, and many people walk away right when the answer they prayed for was already on its way toward them, but you did not quit, and you did not stop believing, and you did not close your heart even when the waiting became heavy, and that faith you protected during your hardest moments is the reason this next season will look different from anything you have experienced before, because God never wastes a season of waiting, and He never allows pain to exist without purpose, and He never prepares someone deeply unless He plans to trust them with something meaningful. And the reason your journey has felt longer than expected is not because you were forgotten, but because what is coming into your life required a stronger version of you than the one you used to be, and now that stronger version of you is already forming, even if you do not fully recognize it yet. And this is the part most people misunderstand, because they expect change to arrive suddenly like lightning from the sky, but most of the time God changes your environment by first changing your identity from the inside, so that when the opportunity arrives you are ready to walk through it without fear and without doubt and without shrinking back into your past mindset again. And that is exactly what has been happening in your life recently, even in moments when you thought nothing was moving forward, because every silent day was shaping your patience, every delayed answer was strengthening your faith, every closed door was redirecting your path, and every lonely moment was teaching you to depend on God in a deeper way than before. And now the results of that unseen preparation are beginning to appear slowly but powerfully around you, and what once felt impossible will soon begin to feel natural, and what once looked unreachable will begin moving closer to your reality, and what once seemed delayed will suddenly make sense in ways you never expected, because God's timing is never random and His plans never arrive incomplete, and the same God who protected you during your lowest moments is the same God who is preparing to reveal why you had to walk through those difficult days in the first place. And when you finally see the full picture, you will realize that nothing you experienced was wasted, and nothing you endured was meaningless, and nothing you survived was accidental, because every step was leading you toward this exact moment where everything begins changing quietly but permanently in your favor. And even now there are things shifting behind the scenes that you cannot yet measure with your eyes, but your spirit can already feel them, and that feeling inside you that something is about to happen is not imagination, it is confirmation that heaven is moving on your behalf. And the reason this message found you today is because you were meant to be reminded that your story is not ending where it is right now, and your struggle is not the final chapter of your journey, and your delay is not the definition of your future, but instead you are standing at the edge of a season where clarity replaces confusion, strength replaces fear, and opportunity replaces limitation. And the moment you step into that season, you will understand why God asked you to stay patient longer than you wanted, and why He asked you to trust Him deeper than you expected, and why He kept you moving forward even when the path ahead looked uncertain, because He was not just protecting your future, He was preparing you for a life that matches the size of the prayers you whispered when nobody else was listening. And that preparation is reaching its completion right now. Folded hand sparkles. And what comes next will not only surprise you, but it will restore parts of your heart you thought were permanently tired, and it will open doors you believed were permanently closed, and it will remind you that when God begins changing your life, He does it in ways that are bigger than what you asked for, and stronger than what you imagined, and closer than you think right now. Listen carefully, because what you are about to understand right now is something many people miss in their life simply because they stop believing too early, and they walk away right before the moment everything begins to shift in their favor. And God is saying to you in this very moment that the pressure you have been feeling recently is not random, and the confusion you have been facing is not meaningless, and the silence you have been experiencing is not abandonment, because when heaven prepares To change a person's direction, it first begins by changing what that person can no longer tolerate, and that is exactly what has been happening inside you lately, because things that once felt normal now feel heavy, things that once satisfied you now feel empty, and people whose presence once comforted you now feel distant and unfamiliar. And this is not loss, this is preparation, because before God opens a new door, He slowly closes your attachment to the old room, so that when the opportunity appears, you will not hesitate to walk forward. And that is why you have felt this strange mix of restlessness and expectation at the same time, as if something inside your spirit keeps whispering that life is about to move in a different direction, even though nothing around you has visibly changed yet. And God is saying that this inner signal you keep feeling is not imagination, it is confirmation, because heaven always speaks to your spirit before it reveals things to your eyes. And the reason this season has felt so intense lately is because the next chapter of your life requires a stronger version of you than the one that entered this season. And transformation never happens comfortably, it always happens quietly and deeply, where nobody else can see it, and sometimes even you cannot fully understand it while it is happening. But later you will look back and realize that every moment of waiting, every unexpected delay, every unanswered question, and every closed door was actually guiding your steps toward something greater than what you originally planned for yourself. And God wants you to know right now that what is coming next will not look like what you expected, but it will look exactly like what you needed. And there is a reason certain plans fell apart recently, and there is a reason certain conversations never happened the way you hoped, and there is a reason certain opportunities disappeared without explanation, because God was not removing blessings from your life, He was removing distractions from your destiny. And what felt like rejection was actually redirection, and what felt like delay was actually protection, and what felt like silence was actually preparation. Because when something big is about to change in your life, heaven does not rush the process, it strengthens the person first, so that when the blessing arrives you are able to carry it without fear and without doubt and without losing yourself in the process. And this is why you have been growing stronger emotionally, even without realizing it. And this is why your thinking has started changing, and this is why your priorities have started shifting, and this is why your patience has been stretched beyond what you thought you could handle, because God is building a foundation inside you that can support the future He is about to reveal to you. And the truth is, most people quit right at this stage, because this is the moment when everything still looks the same on the outside while everything is changing on the inside. But you did not come this far just to stop here, and you did not survive everything you survived just to return to the same place where you started. And God is saying, stay steady right now, because the movement has already begun, even if you cannot see it yet. And the answers you have been waiting for are closer than they appear, and the doors that looked permanently closed are not locked, they were simply waiting for the right moment to open, and that moment is approaching faster than you think. And what is about to enter your life will make you understand why the waiting season lasted longer than you expected, and why certain paths disappeared before you could walk on them, and why certain people could not continue the journey with you, because what is ahead requires clarity, courage, and confidence that only this season could build inside you. And heaven never wastes a season, and heaven never wastes a struggle, and heaven never wastes a delay. And everything that has been happening recently has been aligning you step by step with a change that is already moving toward you even now, Sparkles. And if you stay patient just a little longer and keep trusting just a little deeper and keep moving forward even when you cannot see the full picture yet, you are going to witness a shift that will remind you that God was working the entire time, even when it felt like nothing was happening. And there is something very important you need to understand right now, because this next phase of your life is not going to begin the way most people expect it to begin, and God is saying that the change you have been praying for is already closer than you think, but it will not arrive as noise or attention or sudden recognition. It will arrive quietly and personally in a way that only you will fully understand at first, because when heaven prepares something meaningful for your life, it does not always announce it to everyone around you. It often begins in silence, so that your faith grows stronger than your fear, and so that your confidence becomes rooted in God instead of being dependent on people's approval. And this is why lately you have been feeling moments where something inside you feels calm even though your situation has not completely changed yet, and that calmness is not random, it is confirmation, because before God shifts your circumstances, He shifts your spirit, and what you are feeling right now is the early evidence that something is already moving in your favor, even if the visible results have not appeared yet. And many people misunderstand this season because they think nothing is happening, when in reality everything important is happening beneath the surface where their eyes cannot see it yet. And God wants you to understand that your patience in this season has not been ignored, and your prayers have not been forgotten, and your tears have not been wasted, because heaven never overlooks a heart that continues to trust even while waiting. And what you have been doing quietly through faith and persistence has already created movement behind the scenes that you are about to witness very soon. And there is a reason certain doors have stayed closed even when you tried everything you could to open them, and there is a reason certain people slowly moved out of your life even when you wanted them to stay, and there is a reason certain plans changed without warning. Because what is ahead of you cannot be built on what used to be behind you, and sometimes God must clear space before He reveals purpose, and sometimes He must remove comfort before He releases calling, and sometimes He must slow your steps before He redirects your path towards something greater than what you originally imagined for yourself. And the truth is, the version of you that exists today is stronger, wiser, and more prepared than the version of you that first started this journey. And even though you may not always recognize your own growth, heaven recognizes it clearly, and heaven responds to it at exactly the right moment, and that moment is approaching closer than you realize right now, because what has been delayed in your life was never canceled. It was only being positioned correctly so that when it arrives it will remain stable instead of temporary. And this is why you have been learning lessons about patience, trust, and resilience in ways that you never expected, because those lessons are not random experiences, they are preparation for the responsibility that is coming with the next opportunity that God is about to place in your hands. And what you are about to receive will require a level of confidence that only this waiting season could build inside you, and that is why this season lasted longer than you wanted, because heaven never rushes preparation when something meaningful is involved, and God is saying to you right now that the change you have been hoping for is not far away anymore. And even though it may still feel invisible today, the shift has already begun, and the alignment is already happening, and the answers are already forming in ways that you cannot fully see yet. But very soon you will begin to notice small confirmations appearing in your life that will remind you that everything you went through had a purpose, and every moment of uncertainty had direction hidden inside it, and every delay had protection working behind it. And when that realization becomes clear to you, it will strengthen your faith in a way that nothing else ever could, because you will finally see that God was guiding your steps even in the moments when you thought you were walking alone, and that understanding will give you the confidence to step forward into the next chapter of your life without fear, because you will know that the same God who carried you through the waiting season is the same God who is now opening the door to what comes next, and what is about to begin will not only change your situation, but it will also change the way you see your future forever. And when that moment arrives, you will recognize that this season of silence was never empty. It was full of preparation and positioning and purpose. And the truth is, you are much closer to your breakthrough than you think right now, and heaven is already arranging the details that will soon make everything clearer than it has ever been before. And if you continue to trust just a little longer and continue to believe just a little deeper, you are going to step into a moment that will remind you that God's timing never fails and His plans for your life are already moving forward even now, whether you can see them yet or not. And there is something even deeper that God wants you to understand right now, because the season you are stepping into is not just about receiving something new, but about becoming someone new. And many people pray for change without realizing that real change always begins inside the heart before it ever appears in the outside world. And that is exactly what has been happening within you lately, because the thoughts you are thinking are different now. The way you respond to challenges is different. Now the things that once discouraged you no longer have the same power over you, and even the silence that once made you feel uncertain is now beginning to feel like a place where your faith is growing stronger. And this shift inside you is not accidental. It is evidence that heaven has already started preparing you for something that requires a stronger mindset, a calmer spirit, and a deeper level of trust than you have ever carried before. And God is saying that what you are about to walk into next cannot be handled by the version of you that existed in the past, and that is why this season has stretched you beyond what felt comfortable and beyond what felt familiar, because preparation always happens before elevation, and strengthening always happens before opportunity, and clarity always happens before direction. And the truth is, there were moments recently when you almost gave up on expecting anything to change, because the waiting felt longer than you thought it would be, and the silence felt heavier than you expected it to feel. But even in those moments when your hope felt quiet, your faith never disappeared completely. And that is why you are still here right now listening to this message, because something inside your spirit kept telling you not to quit. And that voice you kept feeling was not imagination, it was guidance, and it was protection, and it was confirmation that your story was still moving forward even when your circumstances looked like they were standing still. And God wants you to know that the reason this message keeps reaching you again and again is because heaven is reminding you that you are not forgotten, and you are not behind, and you are not stuck, even if it sometimes feels that way, because there are movements happening around you that you cannot see yet, conversations forming that you cannot hear yet, opportunities aligning that you cannot recognize yet, and doors preparing to open that you cannot touch yet. But all of these things are already being arranged step by step in ways that will soon become visible to you at exactly the right moment. And when that moment arrives, it will not feel confusing, it will feel clear, and it will not feel forced, it will feel natural, and it will not feel temporary, it will feel stable, because what God prepares does not collapse under pressure, and what heaven releases into your life arrives with purpose attached to it. And there is a reason certain things had to leave your life recently, even when you did not fully understand why at the time, because what is coming next needs space to enter, and sometimes space only appears after something else moves out of the way. And even though those changes may have felt uncomfortable at first, they were actually creating room for something better to take their place. And God is saying that what is ahead of you now is not a repetition of your past, but the beginning of a new direction that will carry lessons from your past without repeating the limitations of your past. And this is Why your perspective has been changing lately, because heaven has been quietly teaching you how to recognize opportunities that you once overlooked, and how to avoid distractions that once slowed your progress, and how to trust timing that once felt confusing. And all of this preparation is happening because the next step of your journey is closer than it has ever been before, and even though you may still be waiting to see the full picture, you are already standing at the edge of a moment that will begin to explain why everything happened the way it did, and why every delay lasted exactly as long as it needed to last, and why every closed door protected you from something that would not have supported your future. And very soon you are going to notice that things begin to shift in ways that feel intentional instead of accidental, and peaceful instead of stressful, and clear instead of confusing, because when God moves in your life, He does not create chaos, He creates direction. And when that direction becomes visible to you, it will strengthen your confidence in a way that makes you realize that you were never walking through this season alone, and that every step you took forward, even when you felt uncertain, was already part of a path that was leading you towards something greater than what you could see at the time. And if you continue trusting just a little longer and believing just a little deeper, you are going to step into a moment very soon that will remind you that God was preparing something meaningful for you the entire time, even when it looked like nothing was changing at all. And that realization is going to bring a peace into your heart that stays with you long after this season of waiting has finally come to an end. And there is something powerful happening right now that you may not fully recognize yet, because the season you are standing in at this very moment is not ordinary, and it is not accidental, and it is not empty, even though at times it may have felt slow or confusing or quiet, because what God does before a major breakthrough often feels invisible to the natural eye but deeply real to the spirit. And that is exactly why you have been feeling this unusual mixture of patience and expectation growing inside you lately, as if something within your heart keeps telling you not to lose hope yet, and not to walk away yet, and not to stop believing yet, because what you have been waiting for is already closer than it appears. And God is saying that the reason your journey has required so much endurance recently is because the blessing that is approaching your life is not small, and it is not temporary, and it is not something that will disappear quickly after arriving, but instead it is something that has been carefully prepared over time, so that when it reaches you, it will stay with you and support the future you have been quietly praying for, even during moments when you were not sure anyone was listening. And heaven wants you to understand that the delays you experienced were never punishment, and they were never rejection, and they were never signs that your prayers were ignored, because sometimes what feels like delay is actually alignment. And sometimes what feels like silence is actually protection, and sometimes what feels like uncertainty is actually direction forming behind the scenes in ways that only become clear later. And this is why you have been learning how to stay calm even when answers did not arrive immediately, and this is why you have been learning how to trust even when results were not visible yet, because faith becomes strongest in the moments when there is nothing visible to hold on to except the belief that God is still working, and that belief is exactly what has carried you through this season until now. And the truth is, many people never reach this point because they stop expecting anything to change right before the moment everything begins to shift. But you continued moving forward even when it felt difficult, and you continued believing even when it felt uncertain, and you continued waiting even when it felt uncomfortable. And that persistence has already positioned you closer to your breakthrough than you realize, because heaven responds to consistency. And heaven responds to patience, and heaven responds to faith that continues even when there is no immediate evidence to support it. And what you are about to experience next will not only answer questions you have been carrying for a long time, but it will also restore confidence in areas where disappointment once tried to take control of your thinking. And God is saying that what is coming into your life now will make sense of moments that once felt confusing, and will bring clarity to situations that once felt uncertain, and will replace doubt with understanding in ways that strengthen your spirit instead of weakening it. And there is a reason this message keeps finding you again and again, because heaven is reminding you that your story is still moving forward, and your journey is still unfolding, and your breakthrough is still approaching, even if the timeline has not looked the way you expected it to look. And sometimes the greatest confirmations do not arrive as loud announcements, but as quiet realizations that suddenly begin to settle inside your heart, telling you that something new is beginning. And that is exactly what is happening for you right now, because the next chapter of your life is already forming around you even before you can fully recognize it. And the opportunities that are aligning ahead of you will not require you to become someone else in order to receive them. They will require you to step forward as the stronger version of yourself that this season has already created. And that is why everything you experienced recently was necessary, even when it did not feel comfortable at the time, because preparation always happens before promotion, and strengthening always happens before expansion, and clarity always happens before direction becomes visible. And God wants you to know right now that what is ahead of you is not something you have to chase with fear or force with pressure, because what heaven prepares arrives at the right moment, without confusion and without chaos. And when it appears, you will recognize it with peace instead of uncertainty, and confidence instead of hesitation. And that moment is closer than you think even now. And if you continue trusting just a little longer and believing just a little deeper, you are going to step into a season very soon where the waiting you once struggled through will finally begin to make sense, and the silence you once questioned will finally begin to feel meaningful, and the path you once could not see clearly will suddenly become visible in a way that reminds you that God was guiding every step you took, even when you thought you were walking alone. And that realization is going to strengthen your faith in a way that stays with you long after this season has ended and the new chapter has finally begun.